Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this webinar organized by GEMMA. Today, the webinar is on money management and the self-employed. And with us today, we have a number of distinguished guests. We have David Stergingel, who is the team leader for GEMMA, the government's portal for promoting financial capability. We have Professor Russell Smith, who is the director who is the professor in entrepreneurship and director for the Center for Entrepreneurship and Business Incubation at the University of Malta. Abigail Mamo, who needs no introduction, as the CEO of the Chamber for Small and Medium Enterprises in Malta, and Dr. Joe Gerada, who is the regulator for the Family Business Office within the Ministry for Economic Services. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
David, as GEMMA, we have published this new publication aimed at the self-employed, looking at the different challenges that the self-employed would have when setting up, when going freelancing, so to speak. Why this specific need? Why GEMMA taking on this role?
The GEMMA's responsibility is to establish an appropriate understanding amongst Maltese citizens of those matters that affect financial capability. And our goal is to ensure that people have the necessary knowledge and information to enable them to plan and subsequently act in an informed on an informed basis, so that they make better decisions relating to financial matter issues. And we look at the population, we look at the Maltese citizen population, not as a monolith, but as different cohorts who are affected differently with regards to their financial capability requirements and financial and money management decisions that they make during their life cycle. And for this purpose, our information and communication strategy is tailored to various cohorts. People who are yet to start a job, teenagers, pensioners, people who are planning to get married, people who are changing jobs, people who are unemployed, people on low income, amongst others. And obviously, the self-employed cohort is an important cohort, which also has financial and money management matters that it must be aware of to make sure that they manage their businesses appropriately and make the right decisions to sustain their income, both during their life cycle as well as when they come to retire. Although I am the GEMMA team leader, I am myself a self-employed, and I've been self-employed in various modes since 2008. And I do have some understanding of some of the key issues that can be that are important for people who are planning to become self-employed entrepreneurs or are self-employed entrepreneurs, where absence of knowledge and absence of access to knowledge can have detrimental effects. As GEMMA, we have a number of resources that we either have online or will be putting online at our portal, which is gemma.gov.mt in the coming days, that are directed towards self-employed. today, as part of this webinar, we will be launching a handbook that we have put together that we believe is of interest to people planning or are self-employed persons. And we will be launching this ebook both in the Maltese and English version. To a large part, this handbook reflects my own experience as a person who, from a full-time employment, entered into self-employment, and the mistakes that as a person who did not have the knowledge of what the transition entailed, and the heartburn that those mistakes had cost me until I managed to understand how and where a self-employed person fits in the regulatory and legislative framework. So this handbook basically looks at four things. Really, what it takes to set yourself up as a self-employed, what it takes in employing other persons with you as a self-employed. Extremely important is the issue of social security contributions, and maybe I would be afforded the opportunity to expand on this later during this debate, and how you handle your income tax matters. So what the handbook does, it walks you through the various agencies and aspects of self-employed that you would have to deal with. And it allows you to, there are interactive links, like for example, the forms and paperwork that you would need to put together as a self-employed person. So you have links that will take you directly to the VAT registration forms, links that will take you to the national insurance forms, and all of that. Just to mention an example, was if you are an employed person, you pay your social security contribution is paid directly by your employer on 10% up to a maximum pensionable income. If you are self-employed, one, you pay 15%, not 10%, and two, you have to pay it yourself. And there are windows when you have to make that payment. Basically, there are four windows in a year, which are March, June, September, and December, where you need to fill the relative forms to pay for your national insurance. So it is an interactive ebook that allows you access to the necessary documentation, and it's there to guide you to make sure that you do not fall foul of regulatory obligations that as a self-employed person you have, which you may not be aware of. So this is the handbook that the ebook that we are launching today. Next week we are launching a handbook for self-employed. It is in Maltese, and it targets a number of particular issues that, as GEMMA, we believe that a self-employed person or a person who wants to become a self-employed should be aware of. And it does this from a kind of a self-employed perspective. One of the issues that we do find with people that, for example, become self-employed is that they tend to look at the social contributory social security contributions, your NI, your national insurance, as a tax rather than as a contribution that will lead you to your pension and your retirement. And the handbook explains the importance of why you should not do that, and I will perhaps touch base on this later on. So this handbook touch bases on a number of key points that we believe self-employed persons should be aware of. Finally, we have a portal. Okay, our portal is gemma.gov.mt. It is bilingual, so you can switch to Maltese and English. What you will find in this portal is that we upload, as a general rule, 2 posts weekly, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And we have a significant number of resources. And there are resources that are applicable for persons who are self-employed or want to know more about self-employment if they are deciding to go down that path. So you would find these resources either under eBooks, under activities. You will find a number of videos directed towards self-employed people. We have a number of calculators that can be useful, and these are all of these are always being updated. So we have an FAQ that you may address, and in the event that there are questions that you have which are not addressed in the portal, and you can search for posts that relate to self-employed by going on the search engine. You can approach us directly at gemma.gov.mt, where we will then respond to you and provide you with the appropriate answer. So we feel that for people in self-employment and as I said, people planning to move into self-employment, GEMMA can be a useful tool to allow you to acquire or strengthen your knowledge base so that you are in a better placed position to make an informed decision and a better decision on matters that relate to you and your family throughout your life cycle. That is the period whilst you're in employment and the period where you are in retirement, so that you can really arrive to the right decisions. So that's me for the moment. It's in your good hands, Mario.
Thank you, David, for that overview of the perspective which GEMMA takes in relation to money management and the self-employed. And I turn to Abigail at this stage as the main representative, so to speak, within Malta of self-employed and small and medium enterprises. How important is this topic? How difficult? What kind of difficulties do your members find in terms of administering these regulatory aspects, in terms of being on time with their VAT payments and their contributions and this and that?
Thank you very much, Mario. It's a real pleasure for me to be here representing my members. As you said, our area of specialization is small businesses, and part of this is the self-employed. Now, with what I'm going to say, I want to clarify that I'm not trying to generalize the topic, and that what I'm going to say is true for everyone. For instance, as David said, he is himself self-employed, and most of the things that I will be saying, I'm sure, do not apply to David, as I'm sure he's very aware of taxation and pension issues. But it does represent the majority, I think, of self-employed. There are many common issues that we see when we discuss certain situations with self-employed, and things that probably they might not be foreseeing at the moment, but then they will face later on as they grow older. Something else I wanted to do before replying directly to your question is to understand the figures, the demographic of these people that we are talking about. We have over 40,000 registered self-employed in Malta. And 30,000 of these, almost 30,000 of these, are self-employed registered without employees. So we are talking about very, very small business units, as small as it gets. And I would classify the challenges that self-employed face that we see in relation to taxation, in relation to preparing for their pension, into two categories. One, I would say, would be the informality. And this is something that I'm sure Joe Gerada will contribute to, because there is a lot of overlap in issues that we see between self-employed and family businesses, because they are smaller, because they tend to be more informal. Sorry about that. There is a difficulty for self-employed to split between the personal and the business aspect. The line is not very well defined. And this is something that they do not do because they want to do something specific. They're trying to avoid making a clear split. It happens because the natural process of how you work and how you integrate with your family, how you go upon your day, naturally just is blended. So at a point you are working on your business, at another point you don't have anything to do. Maybe some people do services and they don't have a job to go to. And in the meantime, they went around doing errands, maybe for the family, maybe for their business, and then they went back into the job. It's not an 8 to 5 job like many jobs that we are used to. So there isn't a clear distinction of when you went into your employment and your business and when you stopped. That's one thing. Just as an example, for instance, even communicating with this target audience is quite challenging for us because their level of organization is quite limited. They do not have the number of resources, the people assigned to specific tasks, taking care of financial issues, taking care of accountancy, taking care of compliance. They do it all. They are a one-man band mostly, and they go through all these requirements and necessities on their own. So even sometimes communicating with them, they are people that juggle between work and life, and they cannot allocate time specifically to be able to communicate even in relation to their business issues. So that is something that is characteristic as well, that reflects then on the level of organization they have and the level of informality they have. Added to that, I would add the lack of knowledge that David already mentioned. So they go into self-employment. Many of them, even though today we find various levels of self-employed, some of them are also have a level of expertise in relation to education. They still do not have the necessary knowledge to understand what the requirements are, and that obviously leads more to the informality and how they go on their business and realizing certain things a bit late in the day. When you are in employment, certain things you do not need to worry about because the company will take care of it for you. You just receive your payslip, things look well on the payslip, they look like they add up, and you do not worry whether the tax has been accounted for accurately, whether everything is being taken care of, because you are assuming that the employer and the people taking care within the employment structure of whatever is due are taking care of this. In terms of self-employed, they have to actually see how to do this on their own, engage people if they need for help, but otherwise they need to go through this process on their own and make sure that things are done correctly. What we find as well, Mario, is that self-employed start slowly. So sometimes you don't go into self-employed and being 100% occupied from one day to the next. So that going in slowly, easing into it slowly, you say, let's see how it goes. I don't need to go into all the formalities of going fully fledged as being a self-employed business. Let's see how it goes. And then once things pick up, you will not be able to then have time and the capacity to remember, okay, so what have I left behind? Should I look into certain systems that maybe I thought I would not need and now I surely need? And then the second aspect of this as a challenge, I would say, is lack of trust. This might sound a bit phenomenal as a title, lack of trust. I'm not saying that they do not trust where the money is go. I would like to say that self-employed, by their nature, most of the self-employed I meet are very self-independent. In terms of wanting to have visibility on things related to them, their business, and their future, and wanting to be in control. Now, making payments, towards something that you are not sure how it will benefit you directly is something that self-employed might not be very keen to do. It is a mindset, an independent mindset, and obviously it is also related to a situation where they think that in the future they will have a certain specific situation that they will be able to cater for better than the national pension system that we have now. Where they obviously fall short is that we don't know the future, and maybe what they have saved up until the moment for their pension maybe had to go for COVID, because nobody was expecting COVID. But when it comes to the pension, to the national pension, that is something that will be guaranteed. That was something that will be secured. The final element is that there is a level of concern related to the adequacy. So, okay, I will probably get a pension for the contributions that I am paying, but how adequate will this pension be compared to what I will be needing as a pensioner? So might as well I do it on my own. I know exactly what funds I am putting in my pension, and I am not relying on anything. I feel that that is a more sustainable model for myself.
Thank you, Abigail. As you were talking, I could see myself in the mirror of what you were projecting. When I was running different kinds of companies, obviously I had the support of my team in taking care of all this, and I didn't really appreciate the time it takes to do all that needs to be done when you are self-employed, before I actually became self-employed. And yes, when I was at university and doing my degree in business management, we had a unit, I remember, this was of course ages ago, in small business management, I remember, but it certainly did not prepare us for the reality of the marketplace, so to speak, of the actual doing this stuff. Before I turn to Professor Smith, I want to invite all participants to put in their questions or their comments in the chat box. We've got our colleague Jasmine Darmanin working in the background, and will be taking care of those comments and also directing any questions that you might have. So as I was saying, Professor Smith, my experience from following that topic at university did not prepare me for the real life when I started working freelance. As in your role at the University of Malta, what does your program prepare entrepreneurs? How does it prepare them for this?
Well, thank you for that question. Let me come back to that in just 1 second. Firstly, I not only endorse this document that's being launched today, I think it is so good. It should be, mandatory reading. It's something that's critical for people starting a new business. And I think Abigail's summary of the challenges faced by SMEs are particularly well made. These are, you're talking about people's lives here. It's not something that's an abstract. It's talking about people's lives, and it's very, very different from the theoretical framework of what's taught in a business school. So your experience at the university of not feeling it prepared you, it's nothing to do with Malta. I've taught at 9 universities around the world, and I've never known any of them to actually prepare people to start a business. So it's very different. They're looking at important but separate, discrete elements of business, such as management and marketing and so forth, and finance, etc. So our Centre for Entrepreneurship and Business Incubation focuses in the 2 areas. We have a Master's in Entrepreneurship, and I should say good morning to many of my ex-students, including Jasmine, who I see amongst the list of participants. It's good of you to join us. I think the Master in Entrepreneurship is separate. It's very much targeting a group of people who want to behave in a more entrepreneurial manner. I think, go back to the name that Abigail has for her group, SMEs, enterprises. Enterprises really are the correct name that we're targeting. Entrepreneurship is merely a flavour of how you run and operate an enterprise. And we see no difference between social enterprises and commercial enterprises. And we see really no difference between employees and employers. Now, what do I mean by that? Employees have one customer. Employers, including the self-employed, have more than one customer. That's the only difference. Any business has to sell a product or a service. There's nothing else. Of course, smart businesses sell both. And so if you choose self-employment, then as Abigail was eloquently pointing out, there's a whole range of responsibilities that you take on that you must actually be thinking about and make sure that you cope with. So the Master in Entrepreneurship is a master's program targeting activities that are leading to high growth companies in particular. On the other hand, Takeoff is an incubator, which means we have a program available for anyone in Malta. It's not simply those people who are ex-students or people who are at the university, not a bit of it. We have a program available there, and you could go now, to answer your question, and look at one of 50 videos that explain a range of topics to help you. What we don't particularly focus on is this area that you've identified, you and David, that really has to have some focus, and that's about planning for the future in terms of pensions, etc. Now, this is terribly important because a lot of people jump into business without thinking about the future enough. Let me give you some facts, and these are not discussion points, I'm afraid they're facts. If one looks at the data from the USA, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the biggest data set that we can find globally, they looked at 500,000 businesses over 25 years. And what they find, irrespective of the year that the business starts, is around half of those businesses have ceased trading by year 5. Now, that's pretty challenging, and it shows you how difficult it is to launch your own business. And if you are self-employed, you're running an enterprise. So let's make no bones about that. It's challenging. It gets worse. If you have only one person in the organization, many research papers, some research that my colleague Joe Bartolo, who is the manager of the Takeoff facility, is currently doing, identifies that the fewer number of employees that you have, and obviously N equals 1 for the self-employed is the lowest, the more prone you are to cease trading earlier rather than later. So it's very challenging to become a sustainable business with just one person. And those are the facts. The next thing to point out is that it would appear that younger people have less ability to create a sustainable business than older people. We don't know the reason for that. Joe's research is looking into that, but I suspect it's probably to do with simply experience and, you know, the world issues that one has to think about. What I do know is that almost all papers that look at reasons for business failure, but at the top of that list, ran out of cash. What I do know is that they list a number of other things in the top 5, for example, no market need, you know, and a variety of other things. They're not the reasons. They're merely symptoms of the only one reason, and that is a failure to plan. And what you're leading people to think about is not just planning for the future of the business, but how that links with, is entwined with, is entangled with the future of their lives personally, and therefore pensions become part of that, as does health insurance and other matters. So I think it's really, really important to bring this to the attention of people running a business on their own, the self-employed, people who are young, who should be putting away modest amounts to a pension because they amount over time to a very large amount, but it should apply to everybody, and anybody can start a business at any point in life. And we have, with my program over the years, helped over 5,000 people in 32 countries, and the oldest one of those was 78, and the youngest was 16. So it's not an age-related thing. So the point I'd make in all of this is that what you've got in your booklet applies to all businesses, and it applies in particular to those businesses at the greatest risk. And those are self-employed people, especially young self-employed people. So getting this front and center in their minds, I think, is terribly important. So our programs that we have at the University of Malta teach you all the components that actually comprise what goes into running a business. And we break that down into 25 things. And I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but that colored picture behind me is the picture that represents those 25 building blocks. Now, that's fine. That's the building blocks. That's fine. That's a bit like saying these are the components of a car, and we'll teach you how to build a car, and we'll teach you how to drive. What you are saying, very importantly, is, well, what happens when you're no longer able to drive, and what happens if that happens because of illness or because you simply retire? So those are often forgotten thoughts that need to go into this mix, and I think they're critically important. So yes, all of the programs that we have at our centre and at Takeoff are geared towards putting all the bits of the jigsaw in place to give you the best chance of becoming sustainable. And our research over the last number of years indicates that we can turn the business failure around. We prefer the term ceasing trading, and people cease trading, they continue trading, they're sustainable if they get everything in place. And that's down to just simply planning. And a bit of that planning is the personal planning that you're thinking about. So, just to reiterate my opening point, hats off to you for bringing this to the attention, and well done with creating such a useful document.
Thank you, Russell. Planning obviously is key to the success and to the survival and sustainability of any business, whether it is, as you mentioned, self-employed or a huge enterprise. But I do believe that in terms of the self-employed and small businesses who are also family-owned, there is then another dimension, and the dimension is obviously in terms of succession planning, which brings me to you, Joe, as the regulator of the Family Business Office. I believe the Family Business Office is a recent creation and was specifically set up to cater for this particular aspect of ensuring of trying to improve the rate of businesses succeeding in terms of moving from one generation to the other, so to speak. So can you give us an idea about how this factors in, and also at what stage should one start thinking about these things?
Hi, thank you. It was very interesting to listen to the other speakers before me. Yes, obviously, practically every self-employed person has a family, okay? We are here to represent family businesses, and we are here to help them as well, as you were rightly saying, to prepare themselves for the next steps to ensure that their business may be continued, okay? The last thing we want to see is family businesses, which are the backbone of our economy, basically, being lost because from one generation to the next, there isn't the right preparation, there aren't the right structures in place so that the business can be passed on from one generation to the next. As self-employed, which is practically the first step within many sectors, for example, in retail, as Abigail can say very well, most businesses prefer to use the setup of a self-employed. What happens, and I have encountered these situations in the past, is that even when you have, since we took retail as an example, let's stick to that example, even if you have a shop which was being rented out, okay, on someone's name, who is the person who is self-employed operating from that retail outlet, they might come to a point eventually where they say, listen, I've built this business for 20 years. It did well. It's still going strong, and it has been growing over the years. It would be rather a great pity to let it go, to close it once. I mean, at the end of the day, we all have a time limit. We all have an expiry date. So it would be really a pity to to stop the business when our life stops, to put it bluntly. So nowadays we have more and more businesses saying, listen, my daughter, my son are interested in taking over the shop. How would it be best to pass on this business, including the goodwill of the business, including the lease, because some leases are favorable in some cases, especially, for example, when we speak about Valletta. So it is at those points in time that people should start thinking, listen, okay, being self-employed has served my purpose for 10 years, 15 years now, but my business is growing. My family wants to be involved even more in this business. I think at that point in time, they need to start thinking about other structures. And when we say other structures, we're not saying simply a limited liability company. It's not necessary to go down that road. Perhaps it could be a partnership, okay, where you involve another family member or more family members. And that is something that as a family business office, we do promote and we try to support a lot. As our participants may know, in actual fact, at the moment, our definition of a family business under the Family Business Act, okay, because our office is regulated by the Act, we do not include self-employed people, okay, because as a minimum, for a family business to be considered as a family business, there has to be direct participation of at least 2 family members, okay? Whereas as a self-employed, in actual fact, normally the business would be represented by one person who might have employees, granted. In fact, a lot of people tell me this. Yes, it's true, I'm self-employed, but I employ my sister, I employ my brother, my wife, etc. However, the legislator, let's say, felt that the best way forward to ensure continuation of businesses would be to have more participation within the business, which is direct participation, okay? So decision making, etc. So yes, I think when you see that your business is growing, when you see that you have other family members within your family who are employed perhaps, who are really interested in taking over the business, that's when we really need to start thinking about how we're going to pass on this business and how to best establish a system which will condone the passing on of the business to the next generation.
Right. So, do you have by now any indication, so to speak, as to what kind of triggers one should be looking out for when they should consider changing their structures to start planning for succession and so on? What would be some of the key indicators, so to speak, Joe?
Okay, the simplest one would be age. Okay, so the founders would realize. Well, actually, I mean, I'll take that back. Very often, the founders do not realize. That it's time to move on. It's a very, I mean, for us, this is very sensitive. Okay, I deal with family businesses on a daily basis, and I know it's a very sensitive subject. If you start something which is practically your baby, okay, there is your reputation, there is a legacy that you're leaving. So obviously, it's very difficult to move away from that and say, okay, now I'm going to leave my reins and I'm going to pass them on to someone else, whether it's a son, daughter, whatever. So that is very, very difficult. However, I think, and I did put a lot of emphasis on this during this COVID situation that we've experienced. I think when we start realizing that, listen, perhaps we're not still as competitive as we were because other businesses are turning to e-commerce, for example, again, to continue with the retail example. How do we develop these ideas? Okay, it's easy. You can get a third party. You can tell him, listen, okay, I want to build a website. I want to start an online shop. However, in reality, and I've experienced this even through our office, no one will know your business as much as the people involved in it, okay? So it is the new generation which will bring in the new ideas. It is the new generation which will have the creativity to say, listen, you know what? We can start doing this to increase our market share. something which probably the founder would not have thought of because he was so used or she was so used to doing business in a certain way that, you know, they would be within their comfort zone doing things as they had always done for many years. But unfortunately, and I've seen this happening, the markets change, the demands change. And if we don't move along with the times, very often what will happen is our business will start dying out on its own. I've seen this, again, to use a very specific example, for example, with travel agencies. I've had family members who had businesses which were very lucrative businesses at one point in time, okay, as travel agencies. Then suddenly people started turning to the internet, started booking online, okay, without the need of an intermediary. Those who did not realize what was happening and who did not realize that they had to move on with the times, they, unfortunately, their businesses failed, and nowadays their businesses are not with us anymore. How does this bring me back to your question? It is the younger generation which starts getting used to new systems, which is more in touch with how the market is moving on. Whereas the older generation very often does not need to go down that road or feels that it does not need to do that. So it is very important when we start seeing that, okay, perhaps things are changing within our sector, things are changing within the market, and we are lacking ideas. I have a son, I have a daughter, they are interested in the business. Very often, unfortunately, we see the founders who do not want to pass on those reins, they lose out on family members who potentially could give a lot to the business, but when they realize that, listen, I have no opportunity to take over from my father, from my mother, because it's very clear, you know, they don't feel that they can trust me with the business at this point in time. What happens is very often these people, these very valuable assets for that family business will move out, go to another business or start a profession and give up on the family business. And that's how family businesses are lost. There are many ways nowadays. I mean, we don't expect the founders to wake up one day and say, you know, I think now it's time. There are many ways of doing this. You can have consultants who are helping you, okay, with legacy issues, with succession issues. There are incentives that we offer, and hopefully we'll expand on those even after the next budget, where we even provide financial support so that advisors can help the business to prepare itself to move on from one generation to the next, to be passed on from one generation to the next. I hope I have managed to.
No, I think the message really comes down to a very simple trigger. It's a family member who you want to be involved in at the end of the day, is showing interest in the business, and there is scope for their involvement, and that is about the time that you should start considering how to evolve this business. Abigail, we've spoken quite a bit about this planning into the future, but in terms of helping self-employed and small businesses in terms of managing their money, in terms of getting them more organized, does the Chamber has this on its agenda in terms of support?
Thank you for asking that, Mario. In fact, when they look at us, many businesses see us just as a place to go to, like, I don't know, when you're going through a rough patch, you tend to be more interested in going to the church and things like that. So you seek help, you seek your social structure, your structure of support. And basically businesses sometimes see us like that. So they just come to us knocking on our door when they encounter a difficulty. But in reality, then, when they step on our doorstep, they realize that there are many, many other services that we supply, because our scope is not just to represent businesses, not just to give them a voice, not just to make sure that whatever policies come out are attuned as best as we can to the needs of businesses and to their realities. But part of our work is also organizing businesses and helping them improve their position by having the necessary knowledge on what is happening around them and what the requirements are. And part of this might be letting them know what funding and schemes are available, how to apply, how to benefit, to increase their competitiveness, to grow their business. And other parts, it is compliance requirements, it is maybe sometimes we find one-off topics that we say, listen, probably businesses don't know enough about this aspect. Let's try and run a campaign. And we are impressed how much interest we get, because as we said, businesses are always very busy, especially the smaller ones, and self-employed are certainly no different. And they do benefit from this easily accessible information. I was very glad to go through the information that you are supplying in this document, and we will be adding it with our list of resources of access to businesses, because many businesses come to us as for guidance at the beginning. So they are starting up, they don't want to start up alone. It's a very big decision that they are taking. And they want some guidance to know, listen, what are the most important things that I need to look out for? As well, we are part owners of a very important entity in Malta, together with Malta Enterprise, which is Business First. Business First sees close to 20,000 businesses a year walking in, asking for information related to businesses, to setting up a businesses, and how to gather information related to their area of interest. And therefore, I do believe that Business First will also benefit from this information. And the more our network, we are part of a network at the end of the day, the more everyone has the right tools available in their hands to be able to guide businesses, and the easier certain information is available and accessible to them, the more I think we will be able to engage the interests of enterprise owners, and they will be able to comply. Obviously, if they don't see the benefit, it will be a bit difficult, because sometimes we live with an assumption that we will never die, and we live with an assumption that we will never grow old, and that we can work forever. Especially when you are self-employed, you think you will have the strength to work till whenever, and then we will see then what will happen. That is obviously a challenge that we need to find a way to overcome.
Thank you, Abigail.
Mario, could I just begin to say a couple of things in support of what Joseph and Abigail was just saying, because it's very, very helpful. Quite simply, it may surprise you that Takeoff at the university is part of my Centre for the SEBI. Joe there, who manages it, does 1,000 hours of mentoring every year. And those are small businesses that come to see him, many self-employed. And quite frequently, this issue of conflict in the family that's already arisen because people have not tackled things in a sensible way, as Joe was pointing out, following the ideas that Abigail was sharing. There's a conflict that arises, and that can be quite challenging within a family dynamic. So to overcome that quite easily, we come up with something called the 3 O's, and say that there's only 3 types of people in any business, whether it's you're self-employed, through to a very large company, and those are owners, officers, and operatives. If you're self-employed, you're all 3 at the same time. Now, in a family business, some people, usually the older generation, perhaps just one of the older generation, is the owner. Some people may have got into positions where they make decisions, so we'd call them officers, and some people, usually the younger ones, are still operatives who just do the work. So it's all about making the transition and being sensible that you have a people strategy that gives the business continuity. And the business continuity is going to be supported by your owner's control, allowing you to see there's a succession planning. In your preamble, you were talking about, really important, and Joe mentioned it too, about a successful family business that's been set up. We want to continue. It's an entity in its own right. A limited company is treated in law, I understand, I'm not a lawyer, as a human being. It has right, it's like a human being. And I think it comes from the Latin verb, corporare. So it's about making a body. It's to incorporate. We talk about this. It's like a human being. So we've got to get people to think about the business having a life of its own. And even if it's not passed to the family, another important aspect to conclude on with respect to pensions is that the business can be sold and that sale fund can be put into your pension pot. So rather than just let it fall by the wayside, which would be a very, very bad thing to do, you have to see how to bring all these things together. So the counselling and helping people to be thinking about this sooner rather than later, I think is critical.
Thank you, Russell. In fact, you preempted me a bit there, because I was going to broach the subject about how we can mentor and coach self-employed in terms of money management, so that they can flourish and basically not be drawn into a vortex, so to speak, of having to keep up with administrative stuff, when really and truly most self-employed want to be out there selling their services and doing things. Last year I was involved with another education institution, MCAST, in mentoring some 10 student groups as part of their journey in entrepreneurship.
Yep.
But that focused primarily on getting a business plan done and in place and all this. So what I'm talking about here are programs like, I'm familiar with some in the UK, where you've got apprenticeship programs where they are assigned a coach or mentor to actually see them through this phase and establish them. Is there something along these lines?
Let me try to answer your question specifically. I think that the word mentor is very, very important, and we certainly find that businesses that are mentored are more successful than the ones that are not. But what matters is what the mentor is doing and how that mentoring is done. And for that reason, in November, we're creating a new program in business mentoring. And that's going to be run over the next 6 months, beginning in November, 6 months to follow that. Initially available for people who've already got the Mastering Entrepreneurship program to help us trial the material. Now, unusually perhaps, my background is medical. So I'm familiar with a range of people offering advice on a medical setting, as it were. And I think you can break mentorship down into different groups. So we see somebody who could be a guide. And what you've provided is an excellent guide in terms of pensions, things you've got to think about. Then perhaps somebody who can coach you to the next level up. Somebody who can provide the background, show you where to go. And that's, again, very, very important. And then after that, there could be a mentor, and after that, an advisor. And so it's a bit like somebody who does first aid, and then somebody who is a paramedic, somebody who is a junior doctor, and somebody who's a consultant physician. So firstly, I don't think we want a term mentor, meaning that we mentor any aspect of business. Even your family doctor, when you go and see her, will refer you to a consultant if she needs additional advice. So we've got to understand that there's a continuum with respect to mentoring. But this is something where a guide can help. This is something where it's so fundamental with respect to financial planning, all the things that you're looking at, in particular pensions and so forth, that you need to be guided in the right direction at the outset and not, later on. So I think mentoring is critical, but I think we have to be careful that we mentor what we can mentor, by which I mean, I don't think it's appropriate for somebody to stand up and say, I'm a mentor, and make people think that they can do everything in the same way that, and forgive me being a little bit harsh, just to be a bit provocative, but usually brass plaques outside accounting firms say XYZ, accountants and business advisors. Now, that's fine, and they give great advice, absolutely. And our program says you have to have an accountant. It's not negotiable. But I don't know how many accountants are experts in necessarily how to deal with an employee when you smell alcohol in their breath. I don't know how many accountants are familiar with dealing with employees when they have a sick child. And so that comes from experience in a different thing. So I think we need to be specific about the expertise that one has and the mentoring that you can do. And I think it's great that your organization is specific about saying you are the place to go to for help in this area, that Joe is specific about providing help to family businesses, which is wonderful. I think that's a great initiative. I think Abigail is specific about its SMEs. You know, we're not talking about the large organizations, we're talking about SMEs. So I think that that's important. And my concern to conclude is that terminology is all a bit confused. I prefer everybody just to talk about enterprises, not entrepreneurs. And, you know, people who run businesses run businesses. And I think that even though I'm professor of entrepreneurship, I wish it was another name. We all know, I'm sure, that entrepreneur is a French word. It means in-between taker. It doesn't mean Richard Branson or something like that. It doesn't mean what people normally think. We are here today to talk about real people engaged in real business, facing real challenges that will emerge over time. And that's not entrepreneurship. You know, this is about real people. And frankly, entrepreneurs can look after themselves. This is about real people, and they need help and assistance from those with experience that can provide it. I think that's what we're all here trying to do today.
Thank you, Russell, for that. David, earlier on, I want to circle back to David now and bring him in terms of one of the main, I think, worries, and it has cropped up in what all of you have been saying, and that is pensions, providing for the future, looking at your NI contributions. David, what are the difficulties here? What sort of hurdles, one may call them, that should somebody who's self-employed be watching out for?
Okay, it's next to noon, so the bells next door are going to start chiming. So I hope you will be able to hear me. I think the basic element that we need to kick off is really the underpinning tag that we have as GEMMA, which is to know, and you can only plan if you know, and plan well, and you can only act well if you do plan well. Now, when we come to self-employed, the absence of knowledge, because people move into it, as was mentioned earlier on, both as a transition, both as a whatever, is I think the major issue to overcome, and this is where we see GEMMA as being a guide. Let's talk about national insurance. Unfortunately, national insurance or social security contribution is very often understood to be retirement pensions. But that's a fallacy. It is not. It is an insurance because it provides an individual with a complementary package of benefits that include short-term benefits, sick leave, unemployment benefit, and it includes long-term benefits, validity, widow pension if you die early. So one of the issues that we see, particularly with self-employed, and we as GEMMA as yet do not have empirical data, but we have a lot of anecdotal data from the Department of Social Security, is that a good number of people who are self-employed skive on paying the absolute minimum in terms of social security contribution. Now, one of the differences between the way the social security contribution is calculated between an employee and a self-employed is that on the employee, it's based on wage, basic wage. On the self-employed, it's based on income, earnings. So you tend to have a tendency for self-employed persons to underdeclare, so that they pay the minimum possible contribution. That can have and does have, and we know this through total data. By total data, I mean people coming to the Department of Social Security who were self-employed, finding themselves in extreme dire straits, where because they took a conscious decision during their lifetime to underdeclare so that they do not pay the full contributory insurance, in the event of a death or a sickness or in retirement, they will find that the social net that the contributory system provides does not give them the support that they should be giving, because of lack of knowledge and lack of understanding of the impacts that lack of knowledge brings with it, made wrong decisions, and those decisions have big time impact on their situations as they may arise. So I think we have a major lacuna in understanding of certain fundamentals. Indeed, government parlance itself does not help. If you look at the Social Security Act, you will not find the definition of self-employed person as we colloquially understand it, but you will find it as self-occupied. Okay, so even at the most basic of terms, we already start at a point of confusion. And this is where people like myself, who have been involved in pensions reform as back as 2004, and this is where GEMMA, for those who do not know, really came from, is that we felt that government had a moral obligation to publicly ensure that people understand the system, and so that they can make informed decisions for the future. Because we knew through surveys that we had held over a longitudinal period that the answers were depicting very clearly that people did not understand the system. When you have 70% telling you that they will have the same level of quality of life in retirement only through the government state pension, it's, major red alert that tells you these guys have got it wrong. Okay, that there's an obligation to guide to make people understand. So this is what we're trying to do. And then there are the money management aspects of a self-employed. Russell mentioned accountant. Sine qua non. If you're going to shortchange on something, do not change on an accountant. Okay, the accountant will know. I mean, when I started off myself, my first business, I have a first degree. I did financial management and accounting up to year 5. So I thought I knew I had a very good level, but I didn't know the technicalities of the law. So one of my major mistakes, which hounded me significantly, was that when I purchased equipment for a hefty amount, I did not know that you cannot claim the VAT before you actually have the certificate in hand. So when I came to terminate the company, because there was the financial crisis and I ended up in a positive amount that VAT owed me, these guys, they opened a major audit on me. And 3 years after I closed my business, I had letters coming daily from VAT, going back to when I opened my business in 2008, telling me that because I got certain technicalities of the law wrong, they were looking at me to pay with interest, okay, 5 years down the road, cumulatively at 1% every month, because I made a technical error in good faith. And apart from the stress, physical, mental, and all of that comes with this kind of worry, getting things wrong with things like VAT and inland revenue, particularly VAT though, okay, can destroy a business, because VAT law is very, very harsh. Okay, some would say it is usury. Okay, because the compound interest is extremely onerous, and people end up in jail because they do not meet their VAT obligations. So So there you come into things. How do you manage that? If you are a self-employed and you issue an invoice of €100, people at times tend to look at that as revenue coming in. It's not. 18% is VAT. 35% maximum is income tax. And so that's 53 of the €100 coming in. It's not yours. So unless you are disciplined, unless you have the rigor that you know that when that €100 check comes in, 53 maximum, and I'm not mentioning NI at the moment, okay? 53 is not yours, and you segregate it. All right. Not doing that means that you're going to use that VAT and income tax as revenue. You're going to use it for your cash flow purposes. You're going to use it for your expenditure. But when the moment comes to pay the provisional tax, at the end of your tax, when you have to pay the quarterly VAT, you don't have the cash to pay it. So this is where we see our role, okay? Trying to get this understanding and some basic knowledge with basic techniques that if you decide to go down this road, you do it well. You do it well. I don't.
Thank you, David, and thank you for sharing your experience also with us. Just one thing, we have a couple of questions here, and I think you've already answered it. How does NI, for example, you mentioned under declaring so that you minimize your NI payment. How would that affect, for example, if you get sick?
The way the Social Security works is prefer if the person gives us his email or her email address and we can respond more technically. But first, to qualify for contributory benefits, you must have, to qualify for your pension, talking about pension, you need to have paid a minimum of 12 years of full contributions. That is 52 weeks times 12 years. If you don't pay that, you will not be entitled to a contributory pension, and you will fall on the means tested pension, which is the old age pension. If you pay beyond the 12 years, but do not pay the full cumulative accumulation period. So a person like myself who was born in 1965, I have a 40-year accumulation period, a 40-year accumulation period, and you pay only 20 years, then your pension is pro rata. So there is a significant correlation to the amount of pension income that you will receive on retirement to the amount of contributions that you pay. My understanding is when it comes to the other benefits and validity, widow, they work on the same principle. Okay, they are prorated. The impact will be prorated, and my understanding is also the same with the short-term benefits. But I would prefer to give the person a more technical, not technical in the jargon, but a more comprehensive reply, so that sure that the reply is accurate. But definitely, as a principle, for a self-employed person to underdeclare, okay, I'm self-employed, I pay the maximum rate, which is, I believe, something around slightly less than €4,000. Now, if I was employed and I am on the maximum pensionable income, my maximum rate would be €2,400. Okay, so as a self-employed person, I'm paying far more than I would have paid if I was an employee. And I do know if I paid the minimum rate, I would pay less than half than what I pay. But doing that by under-declaring, because I do know the system, most people don't, because I do know the system, I know I'm shortchanging myself, my family, in the event, for example, if I pass away. The wife, the spouse, the partner is going to be in a very difficult situation because her entitlement is going to be on the minimum available. So as a general principle, our advice as GEMMA to self-employed persons, do not be myopic, do not be short-sighted. pay it, because it is an insurance. Yes, of course, we know we have constraints of adequacy. Yes, of course, if you can afford it, do alternative provisions. Today, the opportunities are there, private personal pensions, etc. But do not change yourself on your NI, because that is an insurance, and that insurance does not only cover you, but covers your family and covers you in ill health. So it's imperative that that message starts to have some effect. I think we are far away from that. But it is a message that we as GEMMA, with regards to the self-employed cohort, we must reinforce continuously over time.
Abigail, Russell, Joe, final comments? Starting off with Abigail, ladies first, yeah.
So it was a very interesting discussion, and I think the solutions, the problem with this topic is that the solutions are not easy. We have discussed them many times, and it is not clear-cut how forceful you have to be in order to get where you want to get. What is the political backing that you will be getting when you go to certain proposals? And obviously it depends a lot on finding the right balance of gauging the appetite of the target group you are trying to entice. So definitely it is not an easy thing to overcome, but at the end of the day, it is such an important topic that we cannot avoid it. We end up postponing it because our time has not yet come up. For our pension, we put it under the carpet, but then it continues growing, and when it's too late, it will be too late. This is not a situation that you can then make up for. It is a current state of affairs that you will find yourself in. Also, just finally, I wanted to mention something that did not come up with, so much in the discussion. Now, David mentioned it, the aspect of the spouses. Most self-employed, by statistics, the absolute majority are men, but in many cases we do find the female spouse or the female partner who is also contributing greatly to the business, but there is no visibility of this. It is unfortunately undeclared contribution, and it will have a massive impact on the family later on. That's all from my end.
Thank you, Abigail. Joe?
Well, I'll speak about the planning aspect, which is what we're discussing in reality. As I touched earlier on, nowadays, especially again because of the COVID situation, we realize how important planning for the future is. There are situations which we can plan for because we know that at some point or another we're going to get to that point. For example, having to leave the business and depending on a pension. And there are other situations which we cannot plan for, such as the COVID-19 situation, okay? What this has taught us, or I hope that it has taught many businesses, is that whatever situation it is, we always need to plan for those rainy days, okay? So any business, and unfortunately the discussion which has been going on for the past months has been this: listen, we will realize who had been planning ahead, because those are the businesses which will manage to go through this, which will manage to survive and come out perhaps even stronger than before. So planning is essential, whether it's planning when it comes to pensions, whether it's coming to paying your national insurance contributions, whether it's planning as to how you're going to pass on the business from one generation to the next, whether it is about rethinking the structure of the business so that you create a structure which is more conducive to taking the business forward through the years. So yes, I think if we leave the participants with this in mind, the importance of planning, thinking about the future and how we're going to prepare for that, I think we would have achieved a lot today.
Thank you, Joseph. Last words, Russell?
Yes, I just want to follow up on what Joe said, because I think that's an absolutely brilliant summary. You know, everything has to focus on the planning. My military friends would say that, you know, failing to plan is planning to fail. And I think it applies in business very much. So yes, planning is absolutely critical. And he's quite right to point out that things can come out of left field that we're not expecting, like COVID-19, and create havoc across the board. So planning is really important. If you want to know how to plan, then you can come to the Takeoff website and download, as I say, over 50 videos that help you understand how to go about doing things, all free. If you want to have a helping hand in terms of starting your business and thinking about what to do, there are downloadable documents, including a new one that's coming out, prepared by my colleague Claire, together with Bridget Tanti from Malta Enterprise, which complements what they've got in Business First and so forth. So we want these things to be overlapping but complementary. We have a range of different documents that you can download from the website. So just come to the Takeoff website. Everything is free. If you're unsure, come visit, and we'll be very happy to give you half an hour to go through the particular issue and see if we can point you in the right direction too. So listen to Joe. Planning is vital, and if we can help you, come along and make contact. And the same, I'm sure, with Abigail, of course.
Thank you all. With that, we come to the end of our webinar. It's been a very interesting discussion. Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Abigail. Thank you, Joe and David. And thank you, Jasmine, who was looking after the comments at unseen and unheard, but who's been feeding us with a number of comments. Thank you all, and hope to see you for the next GEMMA webinar in October, which will deal with pensions, right, David?
Thank you, Mario.
Yes, it will. And on behalf of GEMMA, I also wish to thank you, the panelists, for accepting to be part of this webinar, and the participants for joining in. And we will be having the webinar online sometime next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.